All right, welcome back to another episode of Alter Your Health. Excited to talk about digestion today. I'm Dr. Ben. I am your host. I'm a naturopathic doctor empowering you to heal yourself with food and mind. That is what we do at Alter Health. And as always, you can learn more at www.alter.health. Today, we are talking about digestion, and we're talking about it through the most important lens, or we're seeing it through the most important lens, and that's the holistic lens, for lack of a better term. Even though I think that that term holistic really gets thrown around willy-nilly, but really we're talking about the mind body connection. And that's just a poor description, really, but words don't really articulate what we're intending to point to. And that's the inseparable nature of mind and body, of body and mind when it comes to our physiologic functions and creating and maintaining healthy balance. So we're talking about really the connection between TMS, tension myositis syndrome, stress, emotions, this sort of hidden pain that might be beneath the surface, some things that we don't acknowledge, feel, that we're maybe not aware of, and how that hidden kind of suppressed, for lack of a better term, pain beneath the surface can manifest physically, physiologic, in many different ways. And we've recorded a few different episodes already about TMS, about the tension myositis syndrome, the mind body phenomenon, and how emotional pain manifests physiologically. Generally, a lot of this conversation tends to orient around musculoskeletal aches and pains, back pain, etc. Of course, we're always referencing the work of Dr. John Sarno here and his most famous book, which is Healing Back Pain, which has supported tens of millions of people at least in overcoming their chronic TMS sorts of symptoms. So that leads us to today talk about the connection between TMS and this deeper mind body process and our digestive system, which I think is a super important one to discuss, as digestive symptoms are pervasive in society. And quite frankly, when in kind of a naturopath, well, in naturopathic medical school, and viewing health from a functional medicine, naturopathic, alternative, whatever sort of lens, where we're kind of seeing the body as a whole, not necessarily the body and mind as one, but the body as a whole. Everything tends to get traced back to digestion because digestive processes are so important for creating and maintaining balance physiologically. And when we're talking about digestion, I think it's helpful to first and foremost understand exactly what we are talking about. What is the digestive process? I think it helps to understand what that is. So I want to start there, kind of talking about the physiology. And then we're going to talk about the psychoneuroimmunology, the kind of the mind body connection or the brain body connection. And then we'll talk about really the psychological implications or manifestations physiologically. So I have a little graphic here that I'm sharing on the screen for those watching. For those listening, I'll kind of go overview the digestive processes. For many of you, maybe you are familiar with how digestion happens, but I think this is helpful because a lot of people just put food in their mouth and hope for the best. And sometimes it's like, things aren't really happening. So it helps to kind of visualize and have this understanding so that we can manifest, for lack of a better term. I've used that term a lot. For lack of a better term, ends up being a term that there might be better terms for. Uh, in any case, digestion starts really before we put food in the mouth. Digestion starts when we start thinking about food and we're salivating. But of course, we put food in the mouth. We break it down. There's mechanical digestion of chewing, which is super important. You got to chew your food. Um, in the mouth, we also secrete enzymes in the mouth, We also swallow, which has a propulsive effect. Is that a word? Propulsive? It propels the whole gut tube downward. And so that's what happens in the mouth. And then, of course, we move through the esophagus into the stomach. In the stomach, we have churning that takes place in the stomach. We have more chemical digestion through the secretion of hydrochloric acid and other things that kind of break down the foods and churn the foods, and then peristalsis is happening as well, which further propels things downward in the through the digestive tract. We have what's not shown on this graph are the sphincters, which separate the esophagus from the stomach from the small intestine, and then, of course, the small intestine from the large intestine, kind of separating these compartments, which are unique in the digestive process. But anyways, the food moves from our stomach into the small intestine, which is actually quite large. The small intestine is the primary source of nutrient absorption. We are further breaking down things with chemical enzymes, secreted from our pancreas and our gallbladder. Of course, the secretion of bile from the gallbladder. Also, the secretion of digestive enzymes from the intestines themselves. We are further churning, and what does it say here? Segmentation. Segmentation is further mechanical digestion in the small intestine that takes place when we're further, there's more peristaltic activity, which is kind of the movement, the contraction of the muscle wall of the intestines, moving things down, absorbing and moving and churning and secreting and breaking down. And of course, then we get to this large intestine, which is the primary source of water absorption from our large intestine. And all the while through our small and our large intestine, or all the intestines, our microbiome which is not really depicted here, is helping us break down and transform the food into nourishment that is going to ultimately, fundamentally, be put to use in our body to build and construct and balance, in terms of giving us the building blocks we need to create and maintain health. And then, of course, the waste product, the defecation. And we've got to be defecating. We've got to be eliminating waste in order for everything to continue. It's a cycle. So if we're backed up, that's going to back up all the processes up top. So anyways, this is physiologic digestion. This is the physiologic digestive processes that I believe are so fundamentally important to understand how they happen. And when we talk about, it is important to optimize physiologic digestion. However, that's not really the point and purpose of this episode. I do want to just note that when we do talk about optimizing physiologic digestion, generally, I think it's helpful to think about optimizing these processes from the top down. There are things that we can do, just fundamentally food hygiene, chewing our food well, eating slowly, making sure that we're taking small bites and, not stuffing our face, and all these sorts of things that are going to start at the top, work its way down. And then, of course, after our mouth, the way to optimize digestive processes in the stomach are ensuring proper hydrochloric acid production, which this is where things like digestive bitters might come into play, to make sure we don't have a state of hypochlorhydria or low stomach acid, which is going to kind of set the stage for dysfunctional or imbalanced digestion moving downward in the small and large intestine. So that's how we like to think about things physiologically in terms of the digestive processes. But that's not really why we're here today. We're not talking about physiologic processes, even though that is important to understand. It's important to optimize. However, what's more important than optimizing our physiologic digestion is optimizing, or at least looking in the direction of our nervous system, because that is what is actually fundamentally controlling all of these things. all of these things that happen in our mouth, our stomach, our small intestine, our large intestine, all the propulsion, all the chemical digestion, all the mechanical digestion, all the muscles, all the enzymes, all the juices, all the microbiota, all these functions and processes that work together to break down food don't just happen automatically. Well, they do happen automatically, but they happen automatically depending on the status of our autonomic nervous system, which leads us to this little breakdown schematic looking at the two branches of the autonomic nervous system. These two branches, which we talk a lot about, the parasympathetic branch, the sympathetic branch. And you see here, this graphic tells us what each branch of this autonomic nervous system is doing. Now, this is kind of black and white, like parasympathetic, sympathetic. And sometimes we do simplistically break it down into these two branches. The truth is, both of these branches are working together all the time. We are almost never truly in a 100% sympathetic state. We always have parasympathetic neurons that are working, that are active. And we are never truly well, maybe we are mostly in a parasympathetic state when we're sleeping. That's why sleep is so healing, so fundamentally important for our health, is because it allows us to activate all of these processes that are under parasympathetic nervous system control, which, as you see here, are involuntary. These are involuntary things. We can't really control it, but we can. And I want to talk about that in just a little bit. But first, you see here, what these branches of the nervous system are doing. Parasympathetic is kind of the constriction of the pupils versus the dilation of the pupils. The parasympathetic branch stimulates saliva and tear production, whereas the sympathetic branch inhibits salivation and tear production. The parasympathetic branch constricts the bronchi, which you kind of think constriction is bad here, but it's really not emphasizing deep breathing, just emphasizing relaxed breathing. Bronchi are, of course, in our lungs. The sympathetic branch, on the other hand, dilates the bronchi because it's all about like taking in lots of oxygen in order to increase metabolic rate, in order to kind of mobilize energy and resources to escape, to survive, etc. Parasympathetic branch of the nervous system slows the heart rate, slows the heartbeat, and also slows the blood pressure, or lowers the blood pressure, whereas the parasympathetic branch increases the heart rate, increases epinephrine and norepinephrine, which further activates this whole process, right? The sympathetic branch stimulates the stomach, the pancreas, and intestines. This is really where I want to get to, right? In this conversation, the parasympathetic branch of the nervous system turns on all of the nerves, or stimulates all the nerves that cause the pancreas to create and release enzymes, that cause the stomach to churn and break down the food and release hydrochloric acid, that cause the intestines to go through the peristaltic activity to move through food along with gravity downward in the intestinal tract so that we can have healthy, regular bowel movements and so on. So this is what's happening when we're in that rest and digest state, right? The parasympathetic nervous system. On the other side of things, the sympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system inhibits stomach, pancreas, and intestinal action, right? It also stimulates, up here you see stimulation of glucose release, the breaking down of glycogen into glucose to create more energy so that we can, again, mobilize energy and resources in our body so that we can run and escape whatever danger we might be in. So sympathetic is all about survival, stimulating the pathways of mobilizing energy and resources so that we can survive and escape. And then at the bottom here, you see that parasympathetic, and maybe you've had these experiences, especially I know for me, if I'm like, and a classic example is when you're exercising. When you're exercising, you're in a sympathetic autonomic nervous system state in a healthy sort of way, because this controlled stress actually allows our body to better adapt to stress in the long run. So if you've ever had the experience of exercising, going on a bike ride for an hour or two, and it's like you don't really have any urge to pee. Your urination is inhibited. But then you get off the bike and boy, you need to pee really quick because the parasympathetic nervous system kind of activates as you're kind of getting back into that relaxed state. So maybe you've had that response. And then there's the promotion of erection of genitals, promotion of ejaculation. So I don't know. I guess this is a little off topic. So I guess when you're relaxed, you have a better erection. But then when you are in that sympathy, so I guess like kind of foreplay is kind of parasympathetic, but then orgasms and sexual activity is more sympathetic. That's kind of off topic, but I really wanted to emphasize really what's going on in terms of our internal organs and digestive organs with regard to this autonomic nervous system. So I always like to, bring this, again, kind of physiologic understanding to the conversation to suggest that it's kind of impossible to optimize our digestive function when we are under primarily sympathetic control, especially when we're eating, right? It's okay to be stressed, right? It's okay for our body to be in this sympathetic state. Obviously, we want to spend more of the time on this parasympathetic branch of the nervous system, but it's life. Life happens. So I think it's so helpful, practically speaking, to at least prioritize getting into this state when we're eating, 3 times a day, 4 times a day, however many times you put food in your mouth, be in a grounded state. It's like so easy or simple. And you see here that this says involuntary control. The autonomic nervous system is involuntary. That's only half accurate. We can voluntarily bring ourselves into the parasympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system. And maybe you already know how to do that. And if you don't already know how to do it, I'm going to tell you right now the kind of quick hack from getting here, sympathetic autonomic nervous system, to here, parasympathetic. And it's as easy as letting go of your next breath. So oftentimes people are told to just breathe, right? Just breathe. Well, breathing actually is a sympathetic and parasympathetic process. The inhalation of breathing activates sympathetic neurons, tells our body actually excuse me as I knock down the microphone. The inhalation actually activates the sympathetic nervous system, telling our body to kind of wake up. And I've heard people like Dr. Andrew Huberman, who I listen to quite a bit and have learned a lot from. He likes to make the distinction that the sympathetic nervous system is not really about stress per se. It's about arousal. Whereas the parasympathetic is about relaxation or, lower energy. So we don't necessarily want to be in just a pure parasympathetic state all the time, and we can't be. So simply inhaling activates sympathetic neurons, but it's really the emphasis on the exhalation that we want to focus on in order to, again, hijack this process or hack this process so that we can bring ourselves really from sympathetic into parasympathetic. So rather than just breathing, yes, take the inhale, but focus on lengthening that exhale and completely releasing the totality of that breath from your lungs. And then doing it again, right? And a good way to do this is actually inhaling kind of more fully and slowly as well, like a double inhale and then a double exhale also. And you think you have all the air out of your lungs, and just let it go even more. And I think that this is a good kind of metaphor for letting go whatever thoughts that brought us into the sympathetic state, for just kind of being in the present moment. We let it all go. We're here and now. So that is the hack for getting your nervous system on board to optimize digestion. But here's the issue. Here's the issue, and we're finally getting to like the beans and broccoli of the conversation. Most people who have a chronic digestive issue, chronic digestive symptoms that maybe come and they go, have a lot of fearful thinking and stress when it comes to eating, when it comes to food. And they sit down to eat, and there's like subtle, maybe even subconscious fear around what that food's going to do, because there's this history of bloating and gas and indigestion and all these symptoms, and not feeling good when we put food in our mouth. So there's this cycle of fear and tension, and there's these patterns that are created around fear and tension of food. So we need to bring awareness to this, to the physiologic processes of digestion, understanding how these how things happen within us, understanding that there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong within our intestines. And this leads to an important kind of sidebar. If you do have digestive symptoms, go to a doctor. Go to a doctor and get things checked out. Make sure you don't have like a hole in your intestines or like a twist in your intestines, that you're like, why am I blanking on what the name is? Like intussusception is a telescoping of the intestines, and then a bowel obstruction or is there can be real kind of physiologic mechanical issues that can cause extreme digestive issues. And that's probably not going to be like a little bit of bloating and a little bit of constipation and a little bit of diarrhea. That's probably going to be extreme hospital sort of stuff. Obviously, like a bursted appendix, a cholecystitis, or a bowel or a gallbladder infection. These sort of things are extremely painful. So those kind of things aside that are necessitating medical intervention, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the more insidious, chronic, coming and going symptoms of suboptimal digestion, the gas and the bloating that, let's face it, plagues 60, 70, 80% of people. If I were to ask people, they'd be like, yeah, I get stomach aches. Yeah, I've got GERD. Yeah, I've got IBS. Yeah, I've got SIBO. Yeah, I've got dysbiosis. So what's causing that? What's causing that? Well, I think that there is a big emphasis on the physiology. There's a big emphasis on the diet. You got to eat the right things. You got to do the right things. You got to take your digestive enzymes. You got to take your digestive bitters. You got to take your probiotics. You got to do all of these things to optimize the digestive functions. However, that's not entirely true, because you also have to be in the right state of mind. You also have to be in the right state of nervous system in order for all these functions to take place. But how do you get there in a reliable, sustainable sort of way? Like, yeah, I talked about that hack for breathing, but this is what leads us to, again, kind of the beans and broccoli of the conversation, which is the tension myositis syndrome, and the way in which our emotional pain and stress and traumas that are beneath the surface, all of this kind of subconscious stuff that we, the beliefs we acquire throughout lifetime, the programming, the imprinting, the kind of like all the pain that is really out of our conscious awareness, all because we deal with stuff to the best of our ability. Every human being does. But there's the stuff that's too difficult to deal with, too painful, too difficult. We don't have time, we don't have energy, we don't have bandwidth, and it's not socially feasible to get to that and deal with it. So where does it go? It becomes manifested physiologically, whether as, musculoskeletal aches and pains, like kind of the classic Dr. Sarno TMS conversation, but also all sorts of other things in our body. You think we just manifest pain physically in terms of the musculoskeletal system? A lot of people are manifesting pain in their digestive system. And I'm not just talking about pain. I'm also talking about physiologic imbalances that manifest in these different parts of our body. So long story short, yes, we have to acknowledge, working to clean up our diet, reduce toxins that are going to kill, or antibiotics that are going to wipe out our microbiome and, suppress our body's ability to create bile and digestive enzymes that are going to allow us to optimally break down our food. Yes, we want to be in a grounded state when we eat our food. We want to take breaths. We want to chew properly. We want to do all of the things that are physiologically required to break down, to digest the food that we bring in. And optimally, hopefully, that food is going to be like whole food, is not going to be hyper processed with lots of preservatives and toxins again. But also, and this is where people, let's face it, this is where people really don't want to look. However, this is where people need to look. We also have to acknowledge the fact that our digestive symptoms, that are pain, that are bloating, that are constipation, that are diarrhea, that are SIBO symptoms, that are our diagnosis, is not purely a physiologic one. Our diagnosis is a psychologic one as well. And when I'm talking about us, we, our, it's the fact is that TMS is a universally normal process and phenomenon for all human beings. The fact is that we all manifest this psychological pain, emotional pain. We all manifest things differently. And Dr. Sarno wrote and talked about how there are kind of these, I don't think he used this term, but it's kind of like a mind virus. And for example, in a lot of Scandinavian countries, TMS manifests as like cervical spine pain, like neck pain, pain in my neck. And it's fairly common in our culture, in Western culture, or in the United States. But what's much more common is low back pain. At least that has historically been the most common way for musculoskeletal pain to manifest, or for TMS to manifest through the musculoskeletal system. So in Scandinavian countries, it's something like 80% neck pain, 20% rest of the back. In the United States, it's something like 80% low back pain, 20% rest of the back. Why is that? It's not like they've got some toxin in the water in Scandinavian countries that afflicts the neck, and in here the toxin afflicts the low back. The fact is that in those regions, in those cultures, it's simply more societally accepted to experience neck pain. In our culture, it's super normal, super socially acceptable to experience low back pain. And now, more so than ever, it's super normal to experience digestive issues. It's super normal to experience SIBO. It's super normal to experience IBS. So the normalization of these pain syndromes, of these digestive symptoms, the normalization of all sorts of chronic conditions allows people the kind of the social space to manifest emotional pain and psychological tension and stress physiologically. So that's not to say that every digestive symptom is purely psychological. It's important to acknowledge both our physiologic digestive processes, working to clean up our diet, optimize, digestive function from the top down, all of these sorts of things. It's important to regulate our autonomic nervous system moment to moment, ground ourselves before meals. And as digestive symptoms probably persist despite doing our best, we must also look deeper. We must also look beneath the surface. And the good news is that we don't need to go really deep. We don't need to go into our past lives. We don't need to go into our childhood traumas. We don't need to relive any sort of emotional traumatic experiences. We simply need to bring our awareness again and again back to the mind-body phenomenon, the interconnected relationship between body and mind. We don't need to figure it out. We just need to acknowledge that the physiologic pain and symptoms, the digestive pain and symptoms, the bloating, the gas, the constipation, the diarrhea, we just need to acknowledge that these feelings that we have physiologically, physically in our body have psychological roots. We just need to acknowledge this connection, and we need to stay committed to understanding this connection. And as we do, we help ourselves kind of rewire pathways and beliefs, and ultimately allow ourselves to be more in a place of understanding and resonance with truth of what's going on in our body mind organism. And as a result, we rest more of the time in that parasympathetic branch of the nervous system, so that everything's kind of in balance and harmony as its default intended to be. So kind of just scratch the surface of this huge, deep topic, believe it or not. But I think it's a very important one and one where that's worth exploring. And for those who don't know, TMS is one thing that I am super passionate about. I'm so passionate about it that I created this program that I have not yet launched. I don't even know what it's going to be called yet. But if you want to learn more about it, you can go to www.alter.health/TMS. And there's actually not a lot to learn about it, but you can put your name to sign up for early access to this program. And hopefully it's going to be launched within the next month, and, hopefully around, within May of 2023. That's my intention. I've kind of, for so many reasons and excuses, I put it on the back burner. And before I sign off, I do want to say one more thing that was on my notes here that I didn't quite get to. And that's the fact that, it's so common for people with digestive symptoms to really hyperemphasize in a perfectionistic sort of way, optimizing nutrition, optimizing supplementation, optimizing everything. There's this perfectionistic tendency that so many people have, especially people who suffer with TMS. Those people tend to be perfectionistic. I certainly do. I guess I'm fortunate that I don't have digestive symptoms, fortunate, quote unquote, but I have experienced TMS manifest in my body through other mechanisms. So it's so important that we let go of perfectionism. We are already good enough. We don't need to get any better at being ourselves. We can let go of perfectionism. And then my point is, it's even especially important to let go of perfectionism as it has to do with our digestion. Let go of balancing our diet perfectly. Let go of combining foods perfectly. We do our best. We do our best. We do our best with everything. And yeah, we want to kind of aim towards cleaning things up, aim towards whole foods, aim towards chewing our foods. We want to aim in that direction, but we want to do so from a place of self-compassion, and not from a place of perfectionism. So I hope that resonates. I hope that comes across clearly. And quite frankly, I kind of feel ashamed, and I feel bad that I feel like a lot of the work that we have done at Alter Health has, up until this point, has only created more perfectionism, only led people to think, oh, I guess I've got to do it better. I guess I've got to eat better. I guess I've got to be better. You don't. You do your best and you orient towards the truth and you keep doing your best. But if anything, what we can all get, quote unquote, better at is we can get better at giving ourselves self-compassion, get better at giving ourselves space to just be as we are. We don't need to be any more perfect than we are. We are already divinely perfect, having this crazy, messy, imperfect human experience. So I hope that you can just appreciate yourself and and give yourself the space to be as you are as you explore and navigate your healing journey and process. So again, on that note, if you are interested in learning more about TMS, learning more about healing yourself from this more empowering body mind phenomenon process, which I think for some people it's like, yeah, yeah, right, like sure, I'll learn about it, I'll learn about TMS, but it's not going to help me because I'm fucked up or whatever. That there's that narrative, that kind of like thought process. And believe me, I've got it too. I'm laughing because it's true for me, just like it's true for all of humanity. But if you are interested in learning more about this deeper process, which I think is of fundamental importance to transcending all pain and suffering to the best as we can as human beings, you can head on to www.alter.health/TMS. Again, that's just kind of a little landing page so that you can put in your name and email to get more information when this new program launches, whenever that might be in the next month or so, if I can get over my own perfectionism and just do the damn thing. So look forward to sharing more, teaching more, exploring more. And thanks for your interest. Thanks for your presence, and sending you all peace and love, and look forward to seeing you next time.